Good afternoon, everyone. This council meeting, it is a karakia. I'm going to try a new karakia, so bear with me to try and change it up. Tūtara mai e runga, tūtara mai e raro, tūtara mai e roto, tūtara mai e waho. Kia tau wai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, kia te katoa. Humi e, hui e, tai ki e. E noho. Welcome everyone to our council meeting here today, second for this month. Welcome councillors, staff and also members of the public, media. Very good to see another almost full chamber here today. I will ask for any apologies. I see my apology for lateness is here, it's cool. Declarations of conflicts of interest. There appear to be none. We will rip into the confirmation of minutes. Confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting, Gore District Council held on the 21st of May 2024. Is there any comments on these minutes? I'll look for a mover that these are true and correct record. Councillor Richard McPhail, seconded by Councillor Andy Fraser. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Confirmation of the minutes, ordinary meeting held on Wednesday, 12th of June 2024. Any changes or questions in here? Look for a mover. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Paul McPhail. No further comment. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Carried. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Assets and Infrastructure Committee meeting on Tuesday the 11th of June 2024. Councillor Fraser. Microphone.
Through you, Your Worship, just through the Three Waters Manager, have we heard back from the Runanga in relation to our applications?
Through you, Worship, so they're currently with the Runanga now, the applications have gone through and are being assessed, and we're hopeful to have a notification back from the Runanga in the next couple of weeks of when the cultural impact assessments will be completed, and so we can get those through to the to Environment Southland to continue the application.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Councillor. Happy to move that confirmation. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Phillips, you were at that meeting, weren't you, Councillor? Yep, perfect. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Confirmation of the Policy and Regulatory Committee meeting on the same day. Could I please have a mover? Councillor Hovell, seconded by Councillor Dixon. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Any urgent late business? Appears to be none. Slight altercation from the agenda in front of us. We've had a request for a speaker, and as per our standing orders, we do have public forum at the beginning. So I'd like to invite Mark and Peter up to, they have a 5-minute presentation as part of public forum. And then they will have 5 minutes worth of questions once they are completed. Welcome Peter Hargest and Mark Copeland, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Ben. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. It all come up pretty quick in the end, and please bear with us. We're here today because there are a lot of worried people and concerned people within the community over the current rate increase. In no particular order, I've got a series of points here I'd like to discuss and work my way through. First concern was submissions were not discussed properly at the deliberative meeting. They are not viewed individually, and councillors did not dig down into the submissions at all. We were led to believe that councillors were looking for ideas to pick up and run forward with. Just first point here. One idea was we would suggest you reduce or adjust the opening hours for the library and the visitor centre. There must be a sweet spot there available. Other councils are doing it, and it is an option for the council. We suggested that the council provide an opportunity for supporters of the various council functions to donate financial support to the council to lift the load on ratepayers. For example, Parks and Reserves. That has a lot of supporters out there. There could be people that are interested in supporting that. Out of control local government spending is a major contributor to inflation within New Zealand. We must push back and attempt to enforce better financial performance from wayward local government. The Reserve Bank uses blunt tools to drive down inflation. We are duty bound as citizens in this country to try and keep the lid on rising costs and rising inflation. So that's why you have a responsibility to get costs down. That's your job. It's our job as citizens to encourage you to do that forcefully if necessary. How else can we get local government to live within its means apart from submitting to you here? We expect you to take it seriously. We suggested that the Gore District Council should join and lead others in local government in fighting against government impositions. A good example of that was fluoridation. The last meeting we were at, I think you was discussing fluoridation here. The Waitaki Council, District Council, had unsuccessfully fought the government. And you're expecting at some stage next year to get notice to introduce fluoride here, and you're expecting to fight it and expecting to lose. We would suggest that the council join other local government, encourage them to stand up and resist the government. If enough people get behind it, you will win. And the main thing is to keep persisting until you do carry the day. So fluoridisation, 3 waters. The government has unreal expectations at times. I think you need to put them right and ask for what you really want and be aggressive with it. The unsustainable rate increase is seriously affecting the well-being of numerous citizens across the spectrum of ages. People are experiencing fear even before receiving any rate demands. The council is creating anxiety. I recall my sister telling me about 14 months ago she encountered an elderly lady on the street, and she was in tears because she didn't know how she was going to pay her rates. Her rates then, well, she's looking at another 21.4 here. So I don't know how she feels about it. She'll probably be distraught. The present rates are plenty. Many people are budgeting to pay their rates now. Any increase or imposition will make that so much harder. You've got to remember, there are only 12,400 men, women and children supporting this council. The council is appropriating far too many resources. This will negatively affect local business activity and confidence. The council is consuming disposable income of its citizens. That is shrinking the marketplace. It's adding to rising costs within our community. It's consuming capital. Businesses need capital just to stay stationary. They need even more capital to get ahead. You're consuming it, and its businesses are suffering because of that. The scale of Gore District Council debt will take years and years to repay. At $60 million, which is what you're going to end up at the end of this year, at $3 million repaid every year, it's going to take 20 years. What's the world going to be like in 20 years' time? I'm afraid it's too easy to borrow. You overstep the line, you just reach back and borrow more. You forget it's going to be paid back. The council needs to behave with far more discipline. The unsavoury and unacceptable treatment of the mayor and 2 councillors telling them to stay away from the party for the former CEO should have resulted in this council withdrawing funding for the food. It has been described as a private function, so it should have been, say, a potluck meal or something similar, as the councillors that attended supplied their own BYO liquor. Therefore, it should not be a ratepayer expense. This was a slap in the face for local democracy and for the local electors.
And I'll add to that, there was 62 pages of staff-related correspondence organising the ex-CEO's farewell, which was one page here, sort of saying the Mayor and Councillor Mackenzie and Stringer were excluded from, which we feel was a bit disappointing, using ratepayers' money to do that. Why not just have had a potluck tea or something?
And here's a favourite of mine. I think the council should revisit the proposal to bury the water lines beneath the riverbed into the Mataura River here. This will simplify and reduce costs significantly. I think you should consult a civil engineer, make sure it's okay, and Environment Southland. I had been led to believe that Environment Southland wouldn't allow it. I spoke to a friend who's well placed down there. He said, as long as you get their consent, not a problem. Work through it. But anyway, you could say the cost of that would be something approaching $1 million versus $4 million plus excess if you overspend or encounter problems. The accelerating debt is putting the life savings and personal real estate assets of Gorse District citizens at risk, as those assets are used as security. Is that true? I believe it is. It has to stop somewhere. If you don't pay your rates, you lose your house. I have been told that elderly people would prefer lower rates versus having wellbeing and welfare officers. One reason here, why are we having these massive budget blowouts year after year? There needs to be more discipline. So what is the point of having an audit and risk committee? They are not doing their job. They need to be keeping the finger on the pulse a lot closer. The Gorse District Council is unwilling to attempt that which it expects. The Gorse District Council is unwilling to attempt that what it expects and will force its citizens to do. They expect their citizens to tighten their belt and to live on less, a lot less. I ask that you grasp the nettle and make meaningful cuts right across your expenditure. Large amounts and small amounts, they all add up. And I think you should end the dependency created on growing debt. It's too easy and it can't go on forever.
Thank you, Peter. And,
Thank you.
and Mark, we have 2 minutes for questions. Councillors, did you have any questions? Councillor Mackenzie.
Peter, just your ideas about crossing the river. Can you be a wee bit more specific on that? What was your plan to do for that?
I think Jack McIntyre, it was his idea. I think it's a good idea. His idea was you do this in the middle of summer when you can walk across the river in shoes. You'd have a cofferdam, maybe do a quarter at a time. You'd put a cofferdam to exclude the river, dig a trench, bury a concrete box culvert in that, and that would be filled up with water, and put a lid on it. The pipes would go inside that box culvert.
Yeah.
You could withdraw them any time you wanted to pull them back out. Far simpler. But there's people who know that process better than me, and they understand it, and I believe it's quite fundamental.
And you asked an Environment Southland person also.
Absolutely, yes. There was no problem doing that, according to my friend who's well placed in Environment Southland.
Thank you for that clarification.
Cheers. Yeah.
Any, Councillor Stringer? Probably the last question.
Thank you, Mark and Peter. Look, how, or any solutions from you guys, how you would see that we remove our, or start reducing our debt from that 60 million, or approaching that 60 million mark? How would you guys see that we do that?
Every journey begins with one step, and any amount helps. Small amount, large amount, becoming efficient, keeping pressure on expenditure. Make your managers more accountable. Keep your thumb on them. Other people have to do it in society. It's part of life. It's discipline, efficiency and economy. Yeah.
If you'd known that this budget was going to blow out like this, would you have approved the building of that library about 3 years ago? There would have been second thoughts done on that, wouldn't there? It's too late, it's done. But moving forward, we've just got to stop all this nonsense frilly stuff and knuckle down and on the basics only.
Yeah, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Peter and Mark. Just a question. So what would an acceptable level of debt be at the moment with the situation we've been in? Like, you've obviously researched everything. What would you expect to see at the moment?
Probably about 30 million would have been acceptable, wouldn't it? About half what it is.
Okay.
And where was that debt? Was it only 3 years ago we were at 25? It's been a hell of an acceleration in the last 36 months.
So you think 30 million would be acceptable? Yeah. Okay.
Anything
Thank you for your
less.
answer.
But well, it's not acceptable. Well, we're at 60 and we can't go back, can we?
No, you can't.
It's about discipline. It's too easy to run up debt and it's too hard to get out of it.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll let you get back to your seats. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ben.
thank you.
Appreciate that.
I will now hand over to the Chief Executive as we get into the adoption of the 2024-25 annual plan.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to our council chambers today. It's really good to see so many of our community out here in person. So yeah, we really appreciate you making the effort and coming down to be here while we make these important decisions. What I'd really like to do before I hand over to councillors to ask questions and to debate is just to take you a little bit on the journey and provide a bit of a recap on how we got to this point. So where we initially started was at a rate increase of 31.7%. So I thought it might be useful just to provide a little bit of information of how did we get to this point? You know, how did we get to a rate increase that was so high? So the first item on the list really was maintenance costs of some of our assets. So a review across the board of our assets showed that basically a number of maintenance issues have built up over the years and a range of maintenance is required to get those assets up to a place where they need to be. The next one was IT projects. Again, an underinvestment in our systems and technology over the years has meant that we now need a large number of projects to get our systems into the place where they need to be. We also face increasing compliance costs across the board. So local government is subject to a range of different regulations and legislation, mostly imposed by central government. With the recent reforms over the last few years, these regulations are becoming more frequent and more costly. So we don't really have any control, well, we don't have any control over those costs, and we pretty much just have to toe the party line in that regard. And that also just includes things like health and safety requirements that we're required to also meet. The introduction of recycling. Salary costs. So basically across the sector over the last few years, salary costs have increased everywhere. So for us to stay competitive with our neighbouring councils and to actually be able to attract good staff to this council, we also have been under pressure to increase our salary costs. A nationwide skills shortage hasn't helped in that regard as well. Our insurance costs have gone up. Our interest rates have gone up. And then things like construction materials and the cost of chemicals. And so households have had inflation, so councils have also been faced with inflation costs as well. And a lot of our inflation costs have actually outpaced household costs quite significantly. So in some areas we've seen inflation of up to 30%. So these are costs, a lot of these costs are costs that we can't control. Yeah, so it does put us in a really tricky position. No staff member here wants to sit at a table and tell their mayor and their council or their community that we're facing a 30% rate increase. We're all here, well, for the most part, you know, all of our staff love the community. We're all here to try and make this community a better place, and that's kind of the purpose of local government. So we were faced with a bit of a scenario, a bit of a situation here. We knew that the 31.7 wasn't going to be palatable or affordable for our community, so we had to spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out where we were going to find savings in order to reduce that amount. So we managed to get it down to 21.4, and while we understand that that's still unacceptable to most of you, because a lot of those costs were outside of our control, we've had to find savings in the small amount of budgets that we have left that we can control. So just to give you a bit of a summary about what we've done. We've unfunded depreciation between 20 and 35%. So depreciation costs have been another one of the costs that we can't control. So basically every few years we have to revalue all our assets. When the valuation of those assets go up, and in places like Three Waters, those values have gone up significantly, then our depreciation costs go up. And that's because to replace those assets, it's suddenly costing us more to do that. So water main pipes and things like that, the costs to replace those have all gone up. So that means we have to collect more in terms of rates in order to fund those costs. So what we have done is not funded some of that depreciation. We've also made cuts to our staffing budgets across the board. We've cut back on those what we consider necessary IT projects, but we've stripped pretty much as we can out of those budgets. We've cut back on property maintenance, and that does mean that you will see assets that are council owned that aren't well maintained. And unfortunately, you know, unless we put your rates up even more, that's just the reality that we're living in. We've delayed the introduction of recycling, and as the gentleman who presented just before did mention, we actually have made cuts as much as we can to programs and services across the board. We can't make massive cuts during this time because we need to have more conversations with you and the rest of the community about what those cuts would look like, but we've made as many small savings as we can find. I just wanted to provide a little bit more context about depreciation and debt. There's a lot of talk about debt amongst our councillors and amongst our community. So what you need to understand is that depreciation is our tool to pay down debt. So we have a plan to pay down debt, and that's why we depreciate our assets and collect rates to fund that depreciation. So by unfunding depreciation, it has lowered the rates, but it does mean that we pay down our debt more slowly. It also means that we don't have as much funding as we'd normally have to fund renewals. So sometimes that means that we might have an urgent or what we call a reactive maintenance. So we might have an urgent replacement of a renewal because we haven't done that renewal when it was scheduled. So for example, we might have a burst water main that's now unbudgeted because we haven't collected the depreciation funding to fund that. So when that happens, that means that that urgent renewal is now debt funded. So unfunding depreciation means you pay less rates. Yes, that's a good thing, but it does mean that it puts us in a worse scenario in terms of our assets and our long-term maintenance of those assets, and also our ability to pay down debt. So that's just something that everyone needs to be aware of. We have heard you that you want us to look at controlling our costs, and that you very clearly stated that the level of rates increases are unacceptable. What we are saying is that we've exhausted our ability to find savings within our existing budgets if we continue to provide you with the same level of service that you have now. And we need to have a discussion, a transparent discussion with the community about what kinds of services you are willing for us not to continue to fund. And so what we need to do, and we're going to be doing this as part of the long-term plan, is coming to talk to you about what services you're willing to give up. So, yeah, that's a conversation that we're very happy to have, and we will be having. So that's it. So I'll hand over to Ben now, but thanks very much for listening and much appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie, for that explanation, and considering that you've been here less than a month, fully acknowledge the work that takes to get up to speed. Just before passing to councillors, I want to have a little bit of a speech, which is something I don't usually do from the chair, but I want to, one, try and avoid the 20-second silence that may occur after, and also I think it's really important to get some of the views across. So if you can stick with me, it is a bit of a lengthy speech, but I just think there's some really key points in here. It's not been lost on any of us how significant a rate increase like this can be. As Mark and Peter both said, the unsustainable rate increase is seriously affecting the well-being of numerous citizens across a spectrum of ages, and we fully understand and share the frustration that's been expressed. I too found it incredibly hard to get my head around the immovable costs that Debbie's just talked about, such as interest, inflation and insurance, which means that we would have to go out with a rate increase far more than most of us could stomach. Despite the decisions of the past, it is our responsibility as elected members here today to ensure that we continue to maintain the levels of service that the community expect and deserve from us. I want to highlight the detailed workshops that we did have, from talking to our activity managers and having to make some pretty hard calls, from reducing budgets to deferring projects that we simply can't afford. Elected members, including myself, have also suggested larger service level cuts, and such as discontinuing services or even selling assets. However, without good comprehensive reporting, the flow-on effects in the short term could cause more harm than good. We are still committed to reviewing our levels of service and making the adjustments through our long-term plan. This has come out clearly in the submissions. Comprehensive reviews mean that we can make sustainable decisions and not knee-jerk reactions. Hard work can already be seen by the likes of the Grants Committee and the Reserve Management Working Group. We'll be looking at better ways to do things and finding cost savings across the board. Lessons can be learnt from this consultation period. We need to be more transparent about the hard calls we make and bring ratepayers along on that journey with us. We need to hold more meetings at different times to get the widest variety of ratepayers possible. I will be the first to admit, and it was mentioned by the two gentlemen before, that we could have done better deliberating submissions, but I want to assure every submitter that I and many of the other councillors around this table read through every single submission, some more than once. And I'm sure there will become reference points as we deliberate further the future of this district. It is important to remember that we're all in this together, not just the fact that we elected members are ratepayers just like you, but councils all across the country are in the same boat. Granted, we are in a worse position. We have no nice reserves to draw on, and we don't have an investment company to force to pay dividends. But we do have the same broken funding and financing model as the rest of the country. We have the same over-the-top regulation. We have the same unfunded mandates. Like Peter and Mark have said, we need to join with other local leaders and local government and advocate for a more affordable New Zealand. Are we out of the woods if this rate rise goes through? Unfortunately not. The trajectory suggests that we're in for a similar rate increase again next year. But again, we're not alone. All of government, both central and local, need to work better together to push that needle back to the affordable side. Otherwise, the future is looking pretty grim. We have a new chief executive, which means new leadership, and we will work together to deliver on change that I and many others stood for. So while the rate increase may or may not go through today, do not think this is the end of the conversation. We will continue to find ways to bring costs down, and we will continue to advocate to central government, because people should be able to live in our district and have clean, safe drinking water, sustainable waste practices and drivable roads, not one or the other. To continue the conversation, I would like to add to my recommendation to this report that we're about to discuss that myself and the chairs are given the authority to respond to each submission where appropriate on behalf of the council. It is our duty to make sure the people are heard, even if everyone cannot be accommodated. Please don't just get discouraged and feel like your voice isn't worth anything. We need your feedback to do our jobs effectively. So join us as we shape the district for the future. We will get through this together as a community. I will now open the floor to councillors if they would like to speak to this report at all. Councillors. Councillor Gardine.
I am one councillor that is probably unable to support this rate rise of 21.4%. We have listened to submissions. We haven't done a thing. It makes a mockery of the whole system. There is some small gains yet to be had, and I've noticed through, even the flags are still going to be flying for another 10,500. And there's other things line by line, but that's not my job as a councillor. My job is to set the strategy and to set where we're going. We need to look at our debt and look at where we're going. We're only going one way, more debt. We have to look at reducing debt, reducing rate rises to only double inflation in the near future. And that's probably going to be something like 6 or 7%. We need to be serious about this, and we need to take $2 million of costs out of the system to get there. That's going to be a hard sell, but there is other options too. You've got to cut your costs, reduce your debt with asset sales, look at where we're going. It's not going to be easy for a ratepayer base of 12,000 to sustain a 21.4% rate rise. Many people are retirees, businessmen, wage earners, farmers all had a hard time this past year. We've seen increases in all our costs, our electricity costs, fuel costs, grocery costs, and our rate costs. But our rate costs are the biggest one. They are the biggest driver of inflation this year. As stated by the economists on the radio, and you only need to talk to people, inflation has been driven by local government. Inflation drives interest rates, which destroy our economy, destroy our businesses' profitability. We have to get our rates under control, to get inflation under control, and to stop rate increases in all their costs throughout the system. I would like the council to be, if they pass this 21.4% rate rise, it's going to increase the income quite by a large amount, and some of that money, if not a lot of it, needs to go to debt reduction, because in future years you'll have surpluses if you actually control your costs. So basically try to control our costs and look at what we're doing. Our level of service will have to go down. We will have to drop some things to get a $2 million cut across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardine. Any further councillors? Councillor McDonald.
I wrote to all councillors as Chair of Audit and Risk about 10 days ago, stating that I was going to support the rate increase, and my reasons this time were I don't like the rate increase at all at 21.4%. So I asked Lorne, our Chief Financial Officer, if we took 3 or 4% off the rate increase, what would happen? And the only thing we can do here without consultation is cut our depreciation, which means we won't be repaying debt, and we also won't be funding the renewals of our water, because that's where the only place we can take the depreciation of the extent of 700,000 to 800,000 is out of our water asset infrastructure, which is in desperate need of many items of replacement. So you're damned if you do, as they say, and damned if you don't. So what I'm decided is to vote for this rate increase this time, but I'm determined, like Councillor Gardine, to have a single-digit rate increase next time, and that will mean slashing, as I said in this email I sent to councillors, $2 million at least out of our current funding, and that is going to mean reducing services, seriously reducing services in many areas. But it's the only thing we can do, is to control our costs and cut services, and they'll have to be widespread. I'm not going to mention any services because it involves where I'd go to do it because it involves people. So I just want to wrap up there and say that I'm unhappy supporting it, but I feel I've got to, because to do changes now is just knee-jerk and they end up costing you more in the long term. You need to think through your changes and work through all the consequences and then come to a decision what ones you're going to make. But it's going to have to be costs. And using Ben Bell's slogan when he got elected, we're really going to have to get back to basics of council, of roads, water, sewerage and footpaths and things. Any of the fancy stuff is going to have to go by the board. So the flags, as far as I'm concerned, are history, and anything items like that are history. We're going to have to stick to the real basics. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hovell.
Council and its activities is a bit like a business, and our ratepayers are our shareholders. And this year, we have let our shareholders down. The level of disappointment that's out there is high, and I understand it and agree with it. The Mayor referred to the way that we considered submissions, and I agree with that. But the key thing is that we as a council continue the patterns of past years in terms of our questioning of some of the decisions that come before us. Previous councils received reports saying we can have a wonderful new building, new library, other assets, yet there was no discussion about what were the economic implications of doing that in the long term. We've got a beautiful new library, but was there any discussion that it's actually going to add X% to our rates for the next 10 years in terms of depreciation? So partly it highlights to me that the way that we make decisions in the past needs to change. Even the way that we receive reports from staff needs to change in terms of highlighting what particular future costs are. And the Chief Executive, in reply to a discussion I had with her, acknowledged that, and I look forward to receiving reports in a better format. But also our communication in terms of, we had some workshops. Why weren't they held in public? Why weren't the public actually part of the process of moving forward to this point? And from that point of view, I feel that we have let them down. I see a strong need to actually look at the way that we're going to proceed through not only our long-term plan, but we're also doing a rating review this year. The public need to be kept informed, aware of the discussions that we're having and give feedback. And I think it's important, particularly for those people that lodge submissions on the annual plan, that we're actually inviting them along to some of our meetings to hear from them further, not only about what's happened in the past, but also the new ideas that we've got moving forward. So I'd like to see our workshops being held more in public and also consulting more with more feedback. The role of government has been talked about, and it historically is government has more and more passed things on to local government, but not had regard to the financial implications of having it, and that's a weakness of the government system. This council was very close to voting leaving local government New Zealand, and I think one of the considerations was the benefit, some of the benefits that we get of they have an important role to work with us or to represent us in pushing back to government on a number of the changes that are happening place. And if they're not performing in the way that we need them to perform over the next 12 months, then one of the cost savings I would be looking at next year is actually moving away from local government New Zealand. It's really giving them advance warning. You need to listen to what our people are saying as well in terms of pushing back to a lot of what government is doing. Borrowing at the level that we've got it can't continue, both because we have a ceiling at the maximum amount, but also it's strangling us in terms of moving forward. I don't believe we are getting a reasonable return on some of the assets that we've got. I'm aware of one lease that we have for a property where the value of the return that we're getting on the lease is less than what we have to pay for insurance. That's unacceptable. We need to be looking at our assets, either getting a good economic return or having a strong social benefit or divesting ourselves of a number of our assets. And when a report comes to council in terms of the reserve management plan, you'll see some of the initiatives that we're looking at there. Just to check my list. No, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine's short and sweet, and a lot of it's been covered. When I decided to stand for the vacant seat here on council last year, I did not believe I'd be sitting here looking at a 20% increase in our rates. I've listened to the council managers and the reasons around it. I support it, but I do not like it. I agree with what has been said here, particularly Councillor Gardine. It has to be line by line. Depreciation is first, and it was well explained by the Chief Executive, thank you. And like everything else, every asset has had a large increase. We have in our homes, as everywhere else, and we have to fund that. Considerable central government changes of policy. The drinking water standards introduced in 2022 put considerable impact on the Gore District Council and its Mataura and Gore water treatment plants, costing us many, many millions of dollars just to get to their levels. We're trying to fight back, and as we talked before, I'm a firm believer that local government NZ is something that we need to move away from, but we need to fight, and I can assure the people here today, particularly our two gentlemen speakers before, we are fighting back. We are asking to speak to the ministers. We are asking to be put in front and ask them to answer the questions. Unfortunately, we've got a very new government and a lot of decisions haven't been made. For me, getting GST back off the rates collected would be a big asset for us, which would be in excess of $4 million, meaning that could be at least a 12% decrease in your rates. I appreciate we have a 60 million debt, and that does need to be addressed. We have to look at our assets and we have to decide what we want to keep and what has to be sold. But the only thing I will say there is once it's sold, it is gone for good. People have asked us to get back to basics, so we need to sit down and think, what are the basics? What is it that you want? And I agree with everything else. The community needs to tell us. People will feel very let down by the decisions that we make here today. We had 150 plus submissions. Suggestions have been made that we didn't take them into account, but I can guarantee you I read every single one of them and I listened to what was being said. Next year's LTP, long-term plan, is where we need to make these big decisions. We cannot afford another rate increase like this. Our community will fold. We need to get debt under control and we have to look forward into the future. I do not want my grandchildren carrying on paying the debt that I am responsible for. And as a councillor, I am responsible. But I do say, my last comment, and I had this worded differently, but I would say to the top contributors on social media pages, please deal with the facts, not hearsay and rumour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard McPhail and then Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I don't intend to transgress all the other facts that have sort of been covered by the other councillors. I will say, and I'll say it from the start, I support the fact that we're going to have to put this through. Everyone has an excuse and can state that there's been many changes and reasons being, and we've workshopped and we've done this and done that. We've all been involved in the lever pulling of this rate situation that we're in today. We've brought this annual plan through here. To say that workshops and various matters weren't covered, they have been covered. And I agree with Councillor Fraser. All the submissions have been looked at. Your Worship has said it himself. We went through this in detail. We sit here today with what we've got to do. Now, life is great if you've got a crystal ball, because I know a lot of people have commented about the old council and picking up various issues, but you've only got to go back, and Peter and Mark indicated that 3 years ago, okay, we had certain million of debt. Look at what the world has contended with in the last 3 years. We've had a pandemic, We've had a lockdown, we've had a recession, we've had weather issues, we've had a global trade crisis, we've had superpowers that are currently in the most global elections going forever, and we also have global warfare. So there's numerous issues that are beyond what we could control when we've had to do and make some of these decisions. But we're now at that stage of the game where the options are very, very little, and I accept that. I accept that what our CEO, our new CEO, who sadly has only been here for a month and has had to deliver this speech to us as a community, that we're going to have to cut, and it'll be substantial cuts to get to where we've got to go to. Where those cuts come in and where we can make allowances or where we can actually hold on to a service, well, the council clearly wants to put everything under the microscope. There's been a lot of talk about GST, and obviously a government that's still trying to settle into its nest has indicated new build GSTs, but it goes beyond that. We should be looking at other GST components and other tax revenue that we can gain from a local government perspective. And that's for us to push through our deputy and our mayor to take back up the stream to central government and say we are in trouble. And the government has indicated there is policy and regional deals that will be going. So we have to be on that train, because everyone's talking about going back to the ratepayers, but we've got to look at anything we can grab above us. Problem being that during those lockdowns and during those pandemics, we thought we were doing some good deals for this community. And sadly, we're having to pay for it today. Councillor Hovell is correct, maybe if we had some long term. But we do have those assets now. They're there. Sadly, if people don't want to use them or believe they were a flight of fancy or whatever, they are there. They're in our communities. We have them. They're generational things that your grandkids will get to see. When you look at it, 21% or 21.4%, there is other councils around that are still sitting at that original amount that we were at, 31.7. And to say that we haven't tried to pull some money out of it, and I congratulate the staff, we have pulled 10% to get down to this point. I know it may sound like it doesn't change the fact that you're going to have to pay 21%, but it has been pulled in. The levers were pulled. So just in closing, the game where we are at the moment, the options are little. We have to support the annual plan we have here. To not support it, if we all decide not to support it, we have 4 days to come up with a game plan by the 30th of June. And I don't think we're going to be able to do that. And I'll also finish just with the fact that, yes, I read the 150 submissions and did go through that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wrote down some notes this morning. Number one, I cannot support or vote in favour of the 21.4% rates increase. I don't want to see the same mistakes made by this council that I believe have been made in the past. It's our job to run a tight ship at all times, not just when interest rates are high, along with insurance costs and depreciation, etc. I ask myself, do shiny new buildings help put food on ratepayers' tables? I think not. I ask myself, does the money spent on a non-existent bridge help them pay their power bills? I think not. It's time Gore District Council and other councils said no to central government. I understand Gore District Council will not be able to meet statutory timeframes if this annual plan is not approved. I, like others, have had many ratepayers come to visit me with their concerns. I had a very close friend yelling at me, abusing me on the phone. He's still a friend, but I understand his concerns. I actually had to hang up on him. This needs to be brought to a head. Government needs to understand right now that this isn't working. I have other words in my head that I could use to say that the system is, you can imagine what my thoughts are. The fact that councils can borrow more money I think of Auckland and places like that, they have having a big hurrah that they're being allowed to borrow more money. The money eventually does still have to be paid back. Yeah. I think government need to put its hand in its own pocket to help out councils throughout the country. Therefore, Your Worship, I will not be voting in favour of this rates rise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments from any other councillors? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. We've heard all the reasons why, inflation, all sorts of reasons why we are where we are, and there are currently no other solutions before us other than what is proposed today. I would expect all councillors being fully aware of the implications that they are privy to, and one of those bits of information is that already, because of our depreciation efforts this year to keep rates low, we will go into the next rates round being at 4% before we even start. So I would vote yes for the recommendation in this report. Voting no is no more than political grandstanding and at best and negligence at worst.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not very eloquent as far as explaining what's goings on, but the process we went through has been pretty robust, I must admit. Coming in, being a new councillor, it's been interesting to see how things work. I don't understand how half it works all the time, because I look at it from a business perspective, and councils don't run like businesses. It's not the way it is, and we're regulated, horrendously regulated. I've got a list of things that, in the long-term plan, we need to look at everything, and I mean everything. We need extreme austerity with every line, with everything else. Local government in New Zealand would be gone as far as I'm concerned. Great South, we've got to look at everything we put money into and just say line by line. But we have done a robust process. We've looked at everything. Submissions, I wrote half a notebook full of things because I respect what people say. I hear it every day. We all live in the community. We've grown up here and we want the best for everything. I'd like to change it immediately now, but we're between a rock and a hard place as far as that goes. We've got to pay, have the money to do the services we are. The long-term plan is when we're going to have to, fellow councillors, we're going to have to nail everything, look at every line and go from there. So I'm backing the rate rise now, not because I want to, but because we've got no other choice at the moment, unfortunately. And it saddens me, but I'm backing it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm fully aware and I acknowledge the work of staff to reduce the proposed 21.4 rate increase. I know that it's been an incredibly challenging year due to external factors outside of the Council's control. I'm also aware of the hardship in our district. Seeing people with calculators when purchasing groceries and putting items back they can't afford, cancelling insurances, going without essential items, and the ever-increasing line of people at the food bank, etc., is indicative of financial pressure and the stress of our community. It's imperative that local bodies push back on government's legislation and initiatives that don't come with funding, costing ratepayers. GST on rates was 0.9% of the total government revenue in 2022, amounting to $1.1 billion. Local government share of that revenue is 2% of GDP, which hasn't increased over the last 50 years. That needs to change. The system is broken and unsustainable, and we cannot just keep rating to cover costs with ever-increasing compliance costs and responsibilities. We're looking down the barrel of Three Waters legislation, costing ratepayers millions. As Chair of the Community Wellbeing and with knowledge from my involvement in other organisations, I cannot with a clear conscience vote for an increase in rates of this magnitude.
Thank you, Councillor. We have two remaining councillors who have been singled out. They don't have to speak if they don't want to. I will give you an opportunity. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I've jotted a few things down here, but it seems we have ourselves in a bloody bad pickle of a situation. Primary industry is down in the area. That is flowing through to our constituents already in the township. Speaking to quite a few of them, they are not seeing the work coming through. Those that are in rental situations, some of them have their rates, their rents will be going up if we increase the rates, so that'll be happening later on down the track for them. So it flows through into that less privileged side of society. One thing that really gripes me about this is we run a debt-funded situation via depreciation. The council's sitting on close to $500 million worth of assets, so I can assume since 1989, since the amalgamations, we've effectively rated for all of that, or rated for most of it. If we'd put it into a sovereign wealth fund where we can live off the interest side of things, that would be great. But for some reason, our society likes to work on borrow this to fund what you're doing now and you'll be fine. And that gets pushed into everyday business as well. I think we're going about this the wrong way. We are borrowing off tomorrow's generation. The rates, look, we get the quarterly statements come through. Why can we not be more reactive and say, look, we have a higher rate for now until we go through to our long-term plan and we can adjust those levels of service. And then those next rate bills coming through can be dropped down as we reduce service or make changes or find other cost savings. One thing I'd also like to see in the future is consultations before the workshops. So we're coming in with that knowledge from the constituents into those workshops. And like Keith said, they're actually participating in that situation. So they're also aware of what we have to go through. And my hat goes off to the staff of all the hard work they've actually put into preparing reports for us, for taking us through that process, for educating us. Because as Councillor McPhail said, council is not like a regular business. It does not operate like it. We're operating at a governance level. Yeah, that's my say, and I'll vote in confidence.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips, you don't have to, but you're welcome to.
Thank you, Worship. No, it's probably a disadvantage going last. Of course, it's always everyone has already spoken about what you've got on your list or on your page. But once again, I probably sit here and have to apologise to the ratepayers. I say it every time I strike the rates. But a vote against the right rates this time would be very detrimental to the future of the Gore District. It will continually rise and rise and rise, and we know that we've done our best, and it's all stated today. And I sit here knowing that I've done my best, and that if in 18 months' time I'm not here, that's fine by me. At least I'll go away with a clear conscience, knowing that I've done everything I could possibly do not to raise the rates any higher than what they are today. Because bear in mind, I have to make a choice whether I'm going to pay my roof or pay my rates as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, councillor, and thank you, councillors, for those individual speeches. Much appreciated. I think it's great that the public actually gets to hear from all of us and just really experience how tough this is for all of us to have to try and strike this rate today. I'm going to handle, if there's no further comments, I'm going to handle the recommendations separately. So we'll get the first one out of the way, that the report be received. Could I please have a mover? Councillor Stringer, seconded by Councillor Fraser. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, carried. The second is around the council to further reintroduction of recycling and reconsider it as part of the 2025-2034 long-term plan. I have been a strong advocate for recycling. I guess I was a bit miffed and disappointed in the submissions that didn't want to proceed with recycling. I fully acknowledge the the high rate increases this year, and it's a bad time to start it, but ultimately I do think about the future generations and that we should be recycling and we should be doing the right thing for this planet. But I do fully appreciate the conversation that has been had around the costs that that brings. But with that being said, I will be voting against this recommendation in particular. Is there any other comments around the recycling? Councillor McPhail.
Just like to remind Your Worship, there is recycling going on in town. Pakeke Lions are doing a fantastic job and can increase that, so we just don't want to forget them.
Thank you very much, Councillor McPhail. Yes, absolutely acknowledged. And over the next year, if this motion does pass, I believe that we will be advocating to WasteNet to further amplify the great work that Pakeke Lions does. I guess from the curbside point of view, yes, I would prefer that recycling is picked up at the door, but I understand the cost increases. Councillor Hovell.
I promoted the option of keeping our two-bin system and returning to the way that it used to be, of having all recycling going into the yellow bin to be sorted and to proceed with that as soon as we can. But the bottom line is that we're trying to save dollars doing a small step at a time, and delaying the recycling is an illustration of one of the steps that we're having to take on, one of those small steps that we're having to take. I, like others, take my I don't have a recycling service in the rural area, so I physically take my stuff to the Lions and down by the tip site. I'm not prepared to add anything into the budget, and delaying the recycling, I think, is a small step that we can take to show that, hey, we're listening to what some of the people are saying out there. It was a fairly even split in terms of those who wanted recycling and those who said defer. But from a cost consideration, I see that as the key consideration at this time. So I'm happy to move that we defer the reintroduction of recycling until it's considered as part of the long-term plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder on that motion? Councillor Phillips. Any further discussion on recycling? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Aye. We had that be recorded, and the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. I will handle all of the other, except for the final one, but I will handle that the council determines that this matter or decision be recognised as significant in terms of Section 76 of the Local Government Act. The next one's quite long. And then finishing up at that, in accordance with Section 95 of the Local Government Act 2002, the Council's 24-25 annual plan be adopted. Can I please have a mover for those suite of recommendations? Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Richard McPhail. If there is no further, Councillor Hovell.
We've had an addition made today to our agenda, and it currently has 2 copies of the annual plan sitting in it. Can I please have some clarification as to which one of the documents we're referring to and what the changes are that have been made?
Through you, Your Worship, I can talk to those. So we have done some further proofreading, and they're just minor additions, making sure things are added up and tied through, and the spelling errors and stuff. So I would recommend the updated version be adopted. I can go through line by line of every single one, but sometimes it's a 64% versus a 64.1%, and little things like that we've just picked up on a second review of it.
Thank you, Lorna, and thank you, Councillor. Just bear in mind we're not doing the last recommendation, which is slightly different, which is the Chief Executive be authorised to make the layout and formatting changes as required. So that will be handling separately at the end. So we have a mover and a seconder. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? 1, 2, 3, 4. You would all like that recorded? 4 against. So that is Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Stringer, Councillor Dixon and Councillor Gardine. And the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. And the final one is, are we okay doing the recommendation that I want to put forward as well around the replies to letters? Is it okay handling the same recommendation? I'm seeing nods. So the recommendation is that the Chief Executive be authorised to make any layout and formatting changes required before publishing the annual plan. And that the Mayor and Chairs are given authority to respond to each submission where appropriate on behalf of the Council. Could I please have a mover? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor McPhail. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. On to item number 6, page 38. This bit is largely procedural, based on the recommendation just made. Do we want any comments from staff? All okay? We will handle that entire recommendation together. Could I please have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Phillips. We'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Councillor Gardine. Once that recorded. And the motion has passed. Thank you very much, councillors. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just looking at the methods of payments, there's a penalty and there's EFTPOS cash surcharges. Is there anything for the ratepayers that actually pay their rates all at once? Is there a slight discount or something that we could do for that, for those that are able to pay them at once?
Through your worship, it's not something that we've investigated as yet, and we don't have one in place. What that would mean is a discount would mean that additional rates, the rates increase would go up because you would have to cover those costs of that income somewhere else. If elected members are willing, we can drop the surcharge. So that is a decision of elected members. If they want to do that, we can remove the surcharge. That's an administration fee for being able to pay.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. This is just a question for Lorne, please. I note that the rate increase, the GST on everything here is inclusive in the costs. Is the rate increase inclusive of GST as well?
Through your worship, it doesn't make any difference whether it's inclusive or exclusive. The rate increase is the same when you take it both into account.
But when you add that on to the bottom line and add GST, is that component of the increase?
It's a neutral effect.
Councillor Havel.
I thank Councillor Reid for raising the surcharge, and I gather you're talking about the penalty. If you're 2 days late, you get charged 10%, which seems excessive and rather draconian. And I'm just wondering if we can explore that a little bit more, whether it's actually set by statute. I'd like to talk further about it, and after I get a reply to that.
Just bear in mind we have passed it, but we can still ask questions in advance. Are we happy to answer that?
It's something that we could look at for the long-term plan, if you're happy to consider it at that point. We could look at the whole system in terms of rebates and penalties and surcharges.
I'd like to explore it a little bit now, because we're clearly going to have ratepayers who are going to be struggling paying the fees. And is there a way that we can lessen it? And okay, I hear we've already passed the resolution, but I'll turn to the provision that's in standing orders, that enables us to revisit a resolution made at the same meeting if we have 75% support of the councillors. I'd be interested to know the views of others. I think the 10% is excessive, and I would like to actually explore looking at a lesser amount over a shorter period of time. So I'm just wondering whether for the first 3 months or whatever after payments are due, whether we can look at a lesser amount.
Just going to let Lorna jump in quickly.
Thank you, and through your worship, that relates to payments outstanding from the previous year. So it's a year down the track. So it's not the current ones. We are actually we work with our ratepayers where they are having some challenges, and we do put payment plans in place for them. We also, where someone does have a penalty applied, we try and contact them, and if we can get them on a payment plan and on a direct debit plan, we actually waive the penalties. So there are a lot of things that we are doing to try and work with our ratepayers to ease that. So it isn't just a straight one. That relates to rates outstanding from last year, not from this year.
Thank you for that response. So that would point to the suggestion from the Chief Executive of something that we explore further. So I'd just like to flag that that's on my agenda of things to look at as part of the long-term plan. But Councillor Reid, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Are we happy to move on? Thank you. Item 7, page 45, NZTA Emergency Works Investment Policies Consultation Report. Murray, would you like to talk to us?
Through your worship. Yes, thank you. So this is probably an example of some of the topics that have been discussed earlier in this meeting, where central government is proposing to shift further costs from that have traditionally been funded by central government to local government. So emergency works are large events, floods, earthquakes, are probably our main likely events. And there have been a number of very large events nationally in recent times. Currently there are some quite high thresholds that we have to meet before we get increased financial assistance to help us with those with responding to and recovery from those emergency events. But the proposal by NZTA is that those thresholds be increased quite significantly, so that it makes it even more difficult for local authorities such as ourselves to achieve or get to that threshold and gain additional funding in the event of a large emergency situation. As you will have noted in my report, we've only called on the major emergency works funding once in the last 20 or so years, and that was in the February 2020 flood. Last year we had quite significant floods in September, but we have had to accommodate the costs of responding to that and any recovery within our existing maintenance and renewals budgets. We're already, responding to probably more frequent events. You may recall the reasonably significant downpours that we had at the end of 2022. Again, we had to accommodate those within our existing budget. So, in discussion with my counterparts at other councils around, particularly in the south, they're of a pretty united view that we should be pushing back against the the proposed changes that NZTA are wanting to make, because I think it appears that the frequency of some of those events is increasing, and we need to make sure that we're not pushing more and more onto our already suffering ratepayers.
Thank you, Murray. And just to add to that as well, we've recently just been a part of a conversation with LGNZ around infrastructure at the Infrastructure Symposium, and that noted was expressed as well. A lot of councillors are in the same boat of not producing this funding because it will leave, especially our smaller councils, up a creek without a paddle per se. So it's definitely a sentiment across the country. Councillors, questions? Jason.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on that, to support your point, really, the scale of what we're talking about here was highlighted to us on that day. In the 18 to 21 year, $150 million worth of that work was claimed. In the last 3 year period, 21 to 24, that's gone up to over 500 million. So that's effectively the cost now that's looking to be then spread out across local government. So this is part of that bigger discussion about unfunded mandates that we need to continue to push hard back on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Worship. Murray, you may be able to help me with this. Just reading through this, and I had to do a whole thing on the acronyms that are in here because there's heaps of them. Who decides what is a 1 in 10 year event and what's a 1 in 20 year event?
Through Your Worship. Yeah, so that's I think it's the scientists, and it's a changing figure. The likes of the regional councils probably inform that, and organisations like NIWA and the Met Service will all be contributing to analysing the figures and updating them as necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Murray. Just to further that, it's the regional council, and mainly the hydrologists. But as we find, it's a moving goalpost because those 1 in 10 year events are happening more than every 1 in 10 years. So they are increasing with climate change. Councillor Richmond.
Could I just add that those are like industry standard measurements, and they relate to probability. So how often those events are likely to occur.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Look, I support what we've got here going back, and I just wonder whether it's getting battered back hard enough. This is a classic example of what we're having to weather, excuse the pun, that, is there other avenues that we're looking at these central government, as we say, mandates and financial mandates on local government, other avenues that we can take to push these further in regard to the financial side of it, because these weather events, and I've been through it with other matters where I've talked about climate change, it's not if, it's when. It can be tomorrow, it can be the next day. It's just going to be a continuing, ongoing. We're just lucky at the moment that we're not getting the bash that the North Island get with some of those weather bombs that go over there. And I think you talk about the policy change, our CEO mentioned it. I think that probably the algorithms change every 6 months on what they dictate to be a 1 in 10 year event. They will get smaller and smaller. And this is a cop-out. It's a cop-out by government to try and save their coppers. So, yeah, look, I totally support the recommendation here from our roading manager.
Thank you, Councillor. And in light of not jumping in after every councillor, I do find it quite interesting, may I say, that it's the same Minister for Local Government as Minister for Transport who's pushing these costs back onto Councillor. I find that quite the juxtaposition, but maybe he's very good at switching hats between roles. Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Gardyne.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Look, I made note of this at an infrastructure meeting, and I was very concerned about this, especially on the time frame that was put forward by Central Government on the 1st of May 2024, closing dates for submissions on June 19. So herein lies their problem. Were we one of the councils that made a submission of the 18 councils of the New Zealand? Were we one?
Through your worship, yes, we did make a submission prior to the cut-off date, and as you'll note, I'm requesting an endorsement of the response or the submission that we made.
So, and the thing about this is that if we note also the events that the Three Waters team have had over the last, since 2020, the events that they have that has almost tripled. And so it underlines the issue about our low-lying gravel roads and our floodplain that we have is we need to definitely do something about this, otherwise our poor ratepayers again will be footing the bill.
Thank you, Councillor. And again, not to jump in front of councillors, but I think it also highlights the concerns here about the pace at which these consultation periods are happening. The fact that we aren't able to even have a council meeting, even though we had 2 this month, to actually discuss this before the submission goes out, is pretty crazy to me when it has such serious effects on the sector. And it was the same for the local water done well bill as well, where we had to whip out a submission in basically a week. So it's just, yeah, highlighting that as well. Councillor Gardine.
I was just going to comment on the timing and the shortness of the consultation. It's just about a fast.
Sorry, I stole your thunder there, Councillor. Any further comments? Just want to thank... Oh, jumping in there, Murray.
Through your worship, one other point that I'd just like to remind councillors of is in the budget for roading, we have for the first time put an amount in there for minor emergency works, building up a fund so that we don't have to dip into the normal maintenance funding. So that's something that councillors need to be aware of as well.
Thank you, Murray. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to thank the staff on the ability to be able to get something out in such a short period of time, and that's why I was asking that question, Murray. I read that you have done it, but it was just a notification to everybody that you're on the ball.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, stealing my thunder this time. Could I please have a mover that these recommendations be moved? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. 2024 resident survey. Sonia, would you like to speak to this report at all?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Chair. I'll take the surveys as read. I suppose the only thing I'd like to add is that if you have a look at the 5 councils that we're benchmarked against across, I think it's 18 activities, we're actually ahead of that average for 13 of them. So it shows that we are performing very well compared to our fellow neighbouring councils.
Thank you, Sonia. Councillors. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I just think it's great to see that the residents are supporting and appreciating some of the assets that we've upgraded, like the James Cumming Wing, the library, the Moonshine Museum, and our other assets in the town. I think that's great. I'm just disappointed in the 27%, I think it is, of people that think we're good leaders in our community. I would like to see us do something about that.
I think you would be appreciative of those people. I feel sorry for the, 73 people who disapproved of us. An increase from last year, but definitely much to improve. Any further comments from councillors on this report? Councillor Reid and then Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's really good to see the satisfaction levels really high, particularly amongst the services and the community centre, the arts and heritage, and the pool, all up around that 98 to 100% mark. I think that's a huge achievement by all the staff involved in all of those facilities, and long may that continue. It's, you know, we can't please, to Councillor Dixon's remark, we can't please everybody all the time, we're well aware of that, but we do our best. So let's hope next year's bigger, better, possibly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Richard McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I did like the percentage of the councillors available to be spoken to, and I would expect nothing less, and hopefully that everybody's cell phone is open and honest to everybody. The respondents that were dissatisfied from are up just a little bit from last year. It's definitely just still a work in progress, and I dare say after our rate rise this afternoon, I think it'll probably go down a little bit after tonight, but that's why I'm here, to take the hard knocks. But I am very concerned about the perception of our district, and the point is that a lot of people don't feel safe in our district, and that the community pride of the Gore district has gone down. So that's something that I'd like to work on, because I believe that the heart of the community is its people within the district, and you've got to be happy and proud that you live there. So I think we definitely need to work on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Good points. Councillor Dixon? Oh, sorry, Councillor Richard McPhail.
You know, just for Your Worship, Councillor Phillips has actually brought up the fact regarding that safety issue and the people that feel a safe place to live, but I think we're probably still, when we gauge ourselves across the rest of New Zealand, we're still doing reasonably well, although we're going down. I think we look at the news every night, we'll see what's going on there. The toilets were the interesting ones again. I know last time when we had this, the toilets were an interesting discussion, public toilets in Gore, and I'm glad to see that they're actually starting to increase in their performance, but still below what we would expect. I'm still not quite sure whether they work out which toilets these are, because every time I've used the public toilets in Gore, they've been of a good standard. And I travel a lot around the lower half of the South Island, and some of the toilets I would describe as quite scary going into at certain times. Our toilets don't scare me, and I think sometimes maybe people have an expectation that they are meant to be polished and scrubbed down every part of the day. Sadly, toilets do get used, and maybe some of the people that are dissatisfied perhaps should go elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor. Former police officer scared in public toilets. I love that headline. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I think Councillor McPhail just verified, and I concur with him about, I think compared to the rest of the country, that Gore is a really safe place to be in. There's some really not so good places to be, but I think Gore is a great place. So I'm disappointed to see that drop down since 2012.
I do hope that the addition of some cameras around the district, though, does hopefully bring that up a little bit next time round. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the key things I'll see here, the priorities, top 3 priorities people are wanting us to concentrate over the next 12 months is improve the roading, recycling, waste services, water and stormwater, which are the key functions of the council, and we should never forget that.
Well said, Councillor. I like the bit about recycling in particular. Councillor McDonald.
The 4 things mentioned by Councillor McPhail there, just the ones I wrote down, was dissatisfaction with the rural roads, recycling, water and stormwater, so concur with them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Vale? Is that something? No? I'll speak for Councillor Hovell then. If I remember correctly, last time this came onto the agenda last year, there was a conversation about kind of why do we do this and whether the questions are correct. I think that's something we still need to revisit in the long-term plan about what are we measuring and why are we measuring it, because there are some things in here that I'm not entirely sure why we measure them or whether we're measuring them correctly. So I just wanted to flag that as well, that I think we should look into the annual resident survey. to in the future. If there's no further comments, I'll look for a move that's be received. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor McDonald. No further discussion. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item number 9, page 60, the Local Government New Zealand 2024 Conference. Did the Chief Executive want to speak to this at all?
Thank you, Mayor Ben. I just wanted to say, there's been a lot of discussion tonight about advocacy to central government, and that's one of the core roles of Local Government New Zealand. At this conference, the Prime Minister will be there and a range of ministers, so I just wanted to put my support forward that we do need to have representation at this event, just to make sure that we're networking with those ministers and that we can make sure that the needs of our local communities are actually heard and understood by Local Government New Zealand.
Thank you, Debbie. I'd like to handle this report. We'd like to split into two because we've got the council representation and then we have the community board representation, which is slightly different because they come from different budgets. Is everyone okay with that? So if we focus on just the council representation at this point, my suggestion just right off the bat would be that myself, the Chief Executive, and Councillor Phillips, if he's willing to go, head along to the conference this year. Councillor Phillips has been nominated for a Superhuman Award, so it is an award, hopefully, which will mean he's recognised as one of the best elected members in the country for his services to local government. That's my reason for selecting him. Is there any further debate around the council table? Councillor Fraser.
I'm going to be the negative in this. We've just had a massive discussion today about spending and everything like that. I understand that it'd be nice to be around the table, but after the last voting report, no one's actually getting listened to. So I will not be supporting sending anybody.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I just ask the question then, in the council budget for the financial year, it's been written down here in front of us. Does that also include your travel as well, or for the year, or is it yours separate?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of my travel expenses and any seminars, courses, etc., are all tied into those two budgets. So training, courses, etc., will come out of that $12,000 budget, and then air travel is combined for. I believe is that staff as well for the air travel? No?
Through Your Worship, that is in the governance budget and the democracy budget, so that is for any elected members for courses or conferences and travel throughout the year for meetings and attendance at those meetings.
Thank you, Lorna.
So here lies the answer to the question then. Is there enough money in the budget for the Mayor, the Chief Executive and myself to go? Because if there's not, then I'll just pull back.
So the Chief Executive would come out of a separate budget. It would come out of an operational budget. So for myself and yourself to go, for the conference itself, I believe it was 25% of that budget. And as it's at the start of the year, I would have to be council would have to be careful on what we go to and what we don't, as to not exceed that budget. And as for air travel, it would take a very small margin of that budget.
Just to be clear, it is budgeted for and there is enough in the budget to cover.
Councillor Hovell.
Families too have things in their budget and then something else comes along and they need to consider very carefully what they're spending their money on. And I've previously spoken out against attendance at the conference unless it's absolutely necessary. So from that point of view, I support the sentiments of Councillor Fraser. So I guess we've heard from the Chief Executive that there is some benefit of being there. We now have the topics that are going to be dealt with at the conference. So I'd actually like to hear from the Mayor in terms of what benefit he is going to bring to us by attending the conference, given the issues that are being discussed?
Putting me on the spot, Councillor, I like it. The Chief Executive just whispered in my ear that we can present back to Council if they so wish when we come back as to what the benefits were. So we'll start with the other conferences, with the other events at the conference. So the LGNZ AGM is where we get to vote on remits. So that is what LGNZ focus on and what they don't. So that means we will get to vote in that procedure and be there in person. The Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, the breakfast meeting is to engage in that program and not on here as the young elected members meeting as well, which I will be a part of. As for the individual items, it's kind of difficult to summarise exactly what we will get out of it, but the Minister of Local Government address will be really important. That'll be the first time the Minister's addressing all of the sector all at once. We got to hear from him at Zone 5-6 in a very short capacity, but he will actually be there and we may be able to sneak some more time with him to really push forward some of the discussions that we had here today about the unaffordability of these rate increases. I believe, if it's not on here, the Prime Minister is also coming. I'm trying to find it here as well. And also the opposition leader as well. So those are all key people to try and get in front of to express exactly what we've just talked about here today. Debbie would like to jump in.
Just to provide some clarification on what a remit is, because you might not be aware of what they are. So basically LGNZ take a policy position and they represent the whole of the local government sector to government on that issue. So it's not just a let's have a vote on what's important to us. It's actually, they actually develop a policy position and then they go and advocate on that position to the government. So things like water reform, the likes of what Murray has talked about with NZTA, they will actually provide an alternative policy position and then engage on behalf of all of local government across the whole country. So it's a really important thing for us to be part of, so that the issues that we have locally are then properly advocated for at a national level.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship. So is there proxy voting?
Yes, there is, but then there's also presentations on the day supporting or against the remit as well. So your proxy won't get to...
So from that, we're not missing out a vote. And we talk about money being in budgets. It doesn't have to be spent.
Councillor Hovell.
We have a new chief executive and I accept the desirability of her wearing her new hat, appearing at a conference like this. I've heard what you've said about the benefits, and I can see some minor benefits, but I'm not totally convinced, and I'm going to abstain on this vote.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I've been involved in conferences for other businesses, and when times are tough, they don't have them, or they do them, and we can do things online now as well. The cost is at the moment, it's just another thing to add on, and the budget thing Andy said there is correct. You don't have to spend it. I don't believe local government New Zealand are any use to us at all, to be quite frank. In the last 3 years, I've looked back at what they've been doing, and I'm not a great fan of them. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardine.
You know, I don't think the Prime Minister is actually speaking. I think it's the Minister of Local Government. He's addressing you and then the Leader of the Opposition.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I thought that he was, but I see he's now been replaced by the Minister for Climate Change instead. Any further discussion on this topic? Just circling back to budgets, because they are already rated for based on the recommendation at the start. If it is the decision to not go to this one, that budget still sits there, so there'll be more ability for us to go to other conferences and courses. So it's not necessarily a direct saving, because there will still be that budget there. And if we wanted to cut back on that budget, that is something we can look at, but again, it would be a long-term plan as we've now rated for what will now be budgeted. Just to try and help the meeting a little bit. Councillor Gardine and then Councillor Richard McPhail.
If you don't spend the budget, it'll carry over as a surplus.
Yeah, Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yeah, just for your worship, my concern is probably that at the CEO, there is probably opportunity there for her to be involved early in her career and actually showing a presence there. That's my only concern around this. I'm not too worried about the other issues, and I agree that local government New Zealand is going to be a question that we're going to ask in coming time, but I don't know how we address that, sending individuals, and I also believe it's worthy, sadly, the honour or the fact of for Councillor Phillips being involved there has come down to a dollar issue. But yeah, I do agree. We've just sat and talked about budgets, and it's really hard to extend a dollar out the other side. But I'm not quite sure whether we can rework it or redo, remodel it so that we don't miss an opportunity for that interaction. We don't want to become completely insular and work over Zoom and be closed down. So I'm not going to abstain from voting, but yeah, that's my piece.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to circle back by the comments that were made before by the fine gentleman who came up, which is that we do need to join and lead others in local government to advocate for a more affordable New Zealand. We simply can't do that from right here in Gore. We need to go and talk to our colleagues from around the country and work with them when central government is in the room listening to us. This is crucial. I can pull back on budgets for other things. I know that a lot of other conferences are held on Zoom, or we can just decide not to go. I just wanted to express that this is the landmark event of the year. All the other conferences can be pulled back on if need be. Councillor McDonald.
I agree with Councillor Rich McPhail. You've got to go to this one. You've got to be seen there. Debbie's got to be seen there. If you're going to put pressure on, it's a numbers game when you get the minister. If you're standing there in front of 25 CEOs or 25 mayors and trying to argue back, the weight's against you. If only a few turn up, he says, well, I can just flag it. But it's a numbers game, and you've got to be hard and vocal.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess just reflecting on my attendance last year, I remember actually standing outside the venue and waiting for the minister to come just so I could get 5 minutes to talk to him about the splitting into the 10 entities and how that wasn't going to work for Otago Southland. So that's the sort of engagement that we managed to get. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Worship. I think it is imperative that we have someone there representing us, but if you want to get a reaction out and quickly, you just say the Republic of Gore will be attending. And basically light that fuse up under them. And that'll start getting attention, because you're right, I've seen where you go to these events and they do their speech and they walk off and they just disappear, and you don't actually get that time with them.
Fortunately, councillors haven't had the maybe displeasure of seeing me at conferences, but I do manage to tackle down ministers when they are walking in between places, because I feel it is incredibly important to make sure that we get our voice across in the hallways, in those small meetings, making sure that we're very vocal. Because while we may be small, we do have a loud voice. Any further comment? Councillor Reid?
Just being slightly facetious, I think you'll probably have a very good chance, because there's very few, like all the big city councils have pulled out of LGNZ, and there'll be less people attending.
It's a fair point. I believe that Christchurch City is still sending quite a fair amount of representation, even though they've left LGNZ, which is interesting in its own capacity. But any further conversation? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I just feel that our new CEO should be there. I think that's very important to liaise with other CEOs around the country. I think that is important.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Worship. Do we need to make an amendment to this recommendation that it's just yourself and the CE attending? If Councillor Phillips,
can I make a suggestion on the recommendation that myself, the chief executive, and assuming that on the basis that Councillor Phillips makes the short list, that the three of us go. If he doesn't make the short list, I don't know whether he'd still want to go. Is that a fair assumption, Councillor Phillips?
That is true, Your Worship. Yep.
Councillor's okay with that recommendation? Can I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Stringer. I will put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Councillor Fraser and Councillor Hovell abstain. And against, Councillor Paul McPhail. All recorded? Thank you, councillors. The motion has passed. The second part of this discussion is around the community board attendance. Do we have any opening comments on this? I just wanted to highlight, I guess, for councillors, just really quickly crunching the numbers, that if the community board is to spend out of their discretionary account to pay for this trip, it will cost in the ballpark of around $5,000, which will deplete their discretionary account down to about $3,000. That is ultimately their prerogative, but just wanted to highlight that that's the numbers that we're talking about. Councillor Hovell.
I think a key phrase you used there is it's their prerogative. They have some discretionary funds and should have the right to use them as they see fit. The recent community board meeting in the minutes, I think, come up later, talked about initially two going to the local community board part of it. One of them suggested that they were happy to step back from that, provided that because they saw a more important project that needed the funds spending on it. So I'm just wondering, in those circumstances where it's really left at the discretion of the community board as to whether they attend or not.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm a little bit disappointed with the councillors around this table. You are the representative. They make recommendations from the community board of Mataura. They are just as much representative as you and I, except they don't have a voting right. They represent Mataura district. They're an elected member. They have every right to this fund as you and I. And the only reason why they decided that they were going to take the money out of the discretionary fund was due to this, what they thought would happen, is that the councillors around this table would not accept one of them going to the community board conference. And I believe that it's shocking that you don't actually think that the community board members are part of this district, and that you should be sending the chairman of the Mataura Community Board and the cost from the financial budget. And if they wish to send two people, then it be at the cost of the community board. That's just my say.
Thank you, Councillor. To provide an alternative view to actually, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, but I didn't want to send anybody to this. I didn't want to spend any money to go to it. I cannot see the point of half of the things here because it's a conference. I've been to many conferences and I generally get nothing from them. I'll give His Worship the due if he chases the minister down. Yes, it would be nice for our new CE to go, but we have just gone through a 20% rate increase. We don't have to spend the budget if the budget is there. If we want to cut back, we've got to look at these budgets, and Councillor Gardine is correct. It becomes surplus next year. We really got to look line by line.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Fraser. I understand that you don't want to spend any money. But it's the wish of the Mataura Community Board Chair and the Deputy Chair that they wish to attend the conference because of the benefit that they see that they get out of it. That's the only thing, that the reason why they're going. The last time they went, they came back really enthusiastic with great knowledge and used it wisely within their community. And if you don't get anything out of the conference, then you shouldn't think about going in the first place. Any conference.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hovell.
Can I just get some clarification? My understanding is that there are two conferences being held at the same time, and therefore what's on the agenda isn't what's on our agenda here. They've got their own agenda.
If you turn over the page 63,
It's got their one there. Okay,
conference.
thank you.
No worries. Just circling back to your point, Councillor Phillips, and acknowledge that you believe that council should be paying it out of our elected member funds. I think the decision by the community board to push towards the discretionary fund was based on the fact that they went last year, and they thought it might be a bit of a push to be able to go on based on council's fund again this year. So I think that's fully acknowledge your point, but I think that's where this came from, the discretionary fund, considering it's the first year that they will be holding the CBEC conference. Any further discussion? The only other question that I had was, I believe when this came to the community board table, there weren't any numbers around it, either the ticket prices and or the discretionary fund. Do we feel like, although we can, if it's passed today, we can potentially pre-book it for them, but potentially going back on their agenda with the numbers to be absolutely sure that they want to spend that money knowing the figures? Or do we think that's overdoing the process? Eerie silence. Okay, well we can approve it here today, or disapprove it and then send it back to the community board for their notes. They can always change their mind.
Yeah, just for your worship, just remind me, we paid for the two members to go up last time? We didn't go near the discretionary fund, did we? Was that, so we did? Okay.
Yes, that would have come out of our elected member budget, yeah.
No, that's all.
Could I please have a mover that we send both the chairwoman and deputy chairwoman to the community board conference, and that for that to be paid out of the discretionary fund, Mataura Community Board discretionary fund? Let's have a mover. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Richard McPhail. Any further discussion on the topic? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Councillor Stringer, Councillor Paul McPhail and Councillor Andy Fraser. All recorded, and the motion has passed. Thank you, councillors. We will move on to the next item. Item 10, page 64, which is the representation review. Did the Chief Executive want to talk to this at all?
Just a quick note about process. So the original proposal for the representation review has gone out to the public. We've received one submission. So tonight we just need to consider that submission and deliberate on it ahead of a decision which will be made at the following meeting. You'll see that there's a second recommendation there, just to make time to have that meeting, because we don't have a council meeting in July and we have some deadlines around when the final proposal has to go out to the public.
Thank you, Debbie. Any discussion around this? Councillor Hovell.
It would appear that the submitter, Mr Maslin, is assuming that combining the wards would result in only one councillor from a second sentence. If council wants to lower the number of councillors, why not in Gore? But it is what has been put forward. is that there would still be 2 councillors representing a combination of the Kaiwera and Waikeka wards. I'd say thank you to Mr Meslam for highlighting it, but assure you there will still be 2 people covering those areas specifically.
Thank you, Councillor. Any contrary views? Councillor Gardine?
Yeah, I presume that's what Mr Maslin's implying, and I think it's probably would be good if someone contacted him and asked him if that is what he is implying, because I think it's probably a non-submission.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure we can, if there are contact details on there, we can contact.
Just to confirm, we have made attempts to contact Mr Meslin without any success.
Are there any contrary views? I will look for a mover of these recommendations. Councillor Val, seconded by Councillor Richard McPhail. I will move the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried. Page 68, item 11, financial report to the 30th of April 2024. Lornay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. Again, similar to previous months, it is a sounds like Groundhog Day, but we are facing the 3 Ds: depreciation, district plan, and debt, or the interest costs associated with debt. Now, these 3 items are the explanation for our deficit. So, our deficit to 30th of April 2024 is $2 million. This is made up of depreciation of 1.3 million, a variance in our depreciation of 1.3 million. With the council not budgeting to collect rates for 100% of the depreciation last year, by default this has meant we were budgeting a deficit. So again, this has been compounded by the revaluation and the amount of debt that we budgeted being under budgeted. So we've had a double whammy on that. So the variance in our debt for the depreciation for the year is 1.3 million. This is a big chunk of what makes up the deficit and also the variance. The other key contributing factor is the district plan. Now, the district plan, we as a council are debt funding. This is an operational expense, so we're not collecting the physical cash from our ratepayers to pay for that expense, we are debt funding it. So again, if we're not collecting the cash and we've got the expense, that adds to our deficit. The district plan costs, we had anticipated last year when the annual plan was done that we'd be much further through the district plan than what we are. And so the budget for last year was undercooked. Plain and simple, it was undercooked. So as at the end of April, we're 693k over budget for the district plan, and that is debt funded. The other contributing factor and variance is finance costs, and that is 342k over budget. And as we've had it explained very eloquently tonight by our Chief Executive, these are things that we had not anticipated on the way through, with interest rates increasing at a greater rate than what we had anticipated. Our annual plan, we have tried to address that and tried to right the ship so that we're not reporting on these massive variances going forward. So I'm happy to take questions from elected members.
Thank you, Lornay. Councillors? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Worship. Lornay, have we seen the end of risk pool?
At this stage, we're not sure. I haven't heard of any new claims coming forward. It's a watching brief, and we will report back to Audit and Risk anytime we hear anything pop up.
I only asked that because in other meetings in there's been issues with councils and courts and findings, and I'm worried that that could open up a plethora of claims.
Through Your Worship, we are seeing it actually come back in our insurance, and actually having councils in New Zealand are finding it difficult to get insurance overseas because of these claims. Riskpool was an organisation that we're involved with many years ago, and as long as, if there's any claims that come up against any of those councils that we were part of during that time, then there may be a call on funds from us. Where we're facing, where councils are unfortunate, is quite often we're the last bastion standing. The developer's gone under or no longer around, the builders are no longer around, so the only person left to get funds out of are councils. So that is what we're facing, and it's, again, New Zealand-wide. The Napier one has been a big one, and I know Queenstown have had some issues as well. But even the collapse of sports stadium or Southland Stadium a few years back has all impacted on these claims.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on these reports, sir? Councillor McDonald.
Just one question, Lorna. How are we tracking year-end wise? Have you got any feel for that?
Through you, Your Worship, it'll be more of the same. We have pulled back marginally in April compared to March. The deficit pulled back a fraction, and I say a fraction. But yeah, we will continue. We will have a deficit at year end. It will be over $2 million. That is given.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I'm a little bit concerned about the 84K over budget for resource consent and planning consultant fees in the absence of not having a planning manager. Could I ask the CEO, please, are there plans to perhaps hire someone in that role that would save these costs?
Yeah,
escalated?
there are definitely plans to look at that going forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything further on these reports? I will look. Councillor Gardine? No?
Just concerning the planning one, that's just the actual cost it cost us as a council, because they would also pass on a lot of those costs directly to the consumer. Would that be right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I please have a move this report be received? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. We've hit our 2-hour mark, so I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break. We've just got mainly procedural stuff to get through, and then in committee part, I'm going to grab a drink of water. So 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 6:05. Thank you. Could we make our way back, please, folks? I see Stuart's going and rounding people up. Thank you, Councillor Hovell. We will resume with the Matoda Community Board minutes. Do we have any comments on these minutes? Councillor Hovell.
It's normal for each item in the minutes to have a resolution and recommendation, but I see at least two of the ones here don't have anything thereafter. I'm just wondering procedurally where there's been a little bit of a hiccup.
My understanding was they're just verbal updates rather than reports. Did you have any? Yeah, so there wasn't necessarily a recommendation needed. Sometimes staff just go and update the community board rather than actually do full reports for them. Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, hope someone answered this question for me. In the point 5, they're talking about Tulloch Park. I'm just reading my way through there, and they talked about cameras. Just a little question is, how long will those recorded imagery be saved for? Just interested, is it saved in the cloud? Is it?
It's probably, sorry, just before Neil answers, it's probably not best quoting it in public setting, because that would then indicate to the public as to how long it recorded. But I'm sure you can. I'm sure Neil will answer it off record. Councillor Stringer.
There should be a security policy within the council too around retention of stuff. So, yep, we have got one. Thank you.
Cool. Any further comments? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just happy to answer any questions that any of the councillors may have, but just in relation to the sign, I don't know whether you've been down to Matara, but it stands out a lot better than what the Corten does. So, and Nikki and I put that vinyl on before the sign actually went up last week. So we made an opportunity while it was still on the ground to do that job, and there was no issue there. It was in the McDonough yard at the time, so and that colour vinyl is not the exact colour that was chosen by the community board, but it was close enough as to what we could get. So now that it's proven that it does stand out, the next job will be then for the community board to think about the painting, etc. So it will probably be later in the year, after the winter time probably, that we'll get to paint that, time to choose a colour. And I dare say that the cost that was put in here, there was a saving of $1,300 because we didn't have to get any persons down to do the job, and the vinyl used was way less, so probably about $88 worth of vinyl used, so good savings.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stringer.
Through your worship, just to Councillor Phillips, number 2, the overgrown section update. Is that just a section that looks really rough, or is it actually growing out onto the footpath in this case? Just a bit more clarity, please.
Yeah, it's the one on the corner, right on the corner, Clyde Street, Carter Street corner. Yep. Yeah. The owner does tidy up the section once he gets notification. I think he's just one of those ones who waits for notification, then decides that he's going to clean it up and tidy it up.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments on these minutes? Just want to say, yeah, well done for that cost saving with the vinyl. It is a little bit bright now, so we'll work on that. But great job, and I think it's important for the public to recognise that it is just vinyl. It won't last forever. The plan is to eventually paint it once it's been trialled for a little bit.
That's correct, Your Worship. And it was just an experimental thing to the cheapest possible version on what to do first to make sure that we were going to be going down the right track. There's nothing worse than spending lots of money painting it and then deciding, no, that's not the right colour, then having to reverse the whole thing. The vinyl, as I said, was about $88 worth of vinyl, no time or labour cost. And yes, it's proven what it was supposed to do. It highlights the issue that it needs to be brighter.
Thank you, Councillor, and it is great to see both signs in. It's fantastic. Would you like to move those minutes? Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Stringer. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, the motion is carried. Thank you, Councillors. Councillor Val, your microphone there. Thank you, sir. Item 13, page 84, issuing of staff warrants and authorisations. Any comments on this? Pretty procedural. Councillor Val?
Sorry. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Reid. Any further comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, motion is carried. Thank you. Page 86, item 14, Local Government New Zealand 4 monthly report. For those who were against what LGNZ does, I hope that we've thoroughly read the report, because there'll be a quiz on it. I'm joking. Do we have any comments about the LGNZ report? Councillor Gardine.
I did notice they're still pursuing or talking about the GST and whether we can get our GST back. And I think you need to keep pushing that issue really hard. And it's important that we, even if they get a proportion of their GST back, because a tax on a tax is pretty cruel. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll keep on pushing that narrative. I think also on that, it was pretty disappointing across the sector to see that that return on GST on new builds at least wasn't even in the budget. They keep talking about it, we're yet to see anything. So definitely pushing that GST conversation altogether. Richard McPhail.
Yeah, just for you, so probably page, what page? 107 for just in relation to we discussed before about our safety and our perception. If you look at that elected member safety and security, there's 74%. That's huge. Had faced aggressive, abusive or offensive behaviour in public meetings. So, yeah, it's a real sign of the environment that we live in. So, I'm not stating, I'm just saying that it's out there. And as we've talked about it before, members should be aware. Sad the face of the community and where it's heading. Well, a small part of the community. So, that's it's quite a high, three quarters of the elected members. It's not 1 out of 10.
I was just going to say that this was something that was discussed at the Chief Executives Forum a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that we are looking at is whether we start a media campaign or a social media campaign to try and encourage the public to not, be quite so bullying or harassing in their behaviour, because it is becoming a real big issue across the whole country.
I think it circles back to the point that you made earlier, Councillor McPhail, about we're a safer community here, but you see what's happening across the country. If you get the chance to talk to some of the other mayors, some of the not even verbal but physical stuff that they've had to experience is pretty horrific, even across councils as well. So it's just being very cognizant of it as we battle these high rate increases. Councillor Stringer and then Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, through your worship, I'd just like to do a quick pot survey by a show of hands. Who here as councillors and staff has actually encountered abuse in the community? Because I can, for one, say I've had abuse from the public.
Are phone calls included in that?
I believe they are, Councillor. And,
yeah,
and
well,
good point, Councillor.
Had one boomer.
Councillor Fraser.
Although I'm not a great supporter of this, I did read it and I brought out on the GST on rates. But it's easy to, it's how you fight that fight. You can go and ask for it, whether they get it. And that's just where I'm pushing with Local Government New Zealand is you actually have to get harder in there. And Councillor Richard McPhail is right, I read that 74%, and then 2 paragraphs down there's the word sovereign citizens, and there's no talking to them. So, and that's where probably a fair bit of the abuse comes from.
Thank you, Councillor. On that, it raises a good point that I know Mayor Rob Scott, a neighbour, has been trying to advocate towards Local Government New Zealand, which is to find some of the easy wins that can actually save the sector some money, whether it's GST or traffic management, for example, actually working together to save the sector some money so that when we consider fees and charges every year that comes with LGZ, we can actually look back at stuff and go, that's where they saved us money, that's where the real value is. So that we're definitely collectively running that narrative. We need to find some savings. I think that, and it's a little bit off topic from this report, but I think that the leaving of Christchurch City Council is quite serious on the future of LGNZ. And I'm going to be very curious as to how conversations develop over the next 12 months to the future of Local Government New Zealand and how they intend to get those councils back, if at all, and also keep the membership that they've got. So, yeah. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just reminding councillors that the 74% was at public meetings. I think that's quite outstanding. You know, it just beggars belief that people have to put up with that sort of rubbish. The other thing around the sovereign citizens, I do know as a JP that it's been a big focus for us in the latest training that we were doing. They're people who become quite aggressive and push their own thing, and once they're on your property you have a lot of trouble getting them off, and it's become a personal safety issue for a lot of people in that particular area, and Councillor Gardine will know, as his wife's one as well, to be able to actually keep themselves safe, and who do they invite into their home to have their papers signed. So yeah, they're out there, unfortunately. What you do about it, who knows?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser, did you have a...
Oh, just one more point, and just reading through, I wrote it down here, the constant government reforms, that you're fighting one thing and then next thing it changes and next thing it changes, and that come through. Just the two notes that I made, that was the biggest one, was that.
Yeah, I think timeframes is something that's definitely been pushed back on heavily, and that's not even just our sector. I think it's across the board. It's pretty rough in terms of consultation. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. If you read today that our water identity is looking at now at stormwater and wastewater as well for new legislation. So.
Any further comments on this report? Look for a move that this report be received. Councillor MacDonald, seconded by Councillor Dixon. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Thank you. Councillors, Sport New Zealand, I believe that is Councillor MacDonald. Did you want to speak to that at all?
It's pretty self-explanatory. We had to decline the two applications because they failed to meet the criteria, but the rest are approved and the amounts are there, and we had enough money to pay them out, so that's good.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments? Councillor Phillips.
Were the two applications that were declined, were they given notice of why they were declined, and then that they could tidy up their application in the future?
Yes, they were, but they can't be for representative teams. They've got to be for local competition.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I please have a move that these minutes be received? Councillor MacDonald, seconded by Councillor Reid. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. I will now move from the chair that we exclude the public from the following items.